Hi there, welcome back to IndyCar on the 28th of February. Now normally, of course, this would be the last day of February, but of course this year is a leap year, so we have an extra day. February is a day longer, the year is 366 days long, so it seems like a long time, doesn't it? Anyway, we have some news items which I think are worth having a look at today and analysing. And the first one I think I would class as ridiculous, because it is ridiculous. You may be aware that there is a geriatric Lord, former Labour MP and now Labour peer, Sir George, or is it Lord George Fowkes? Anyway, this Lord has been pronouncing again on Scotland. This man has a long history of hating Scottish independence, hating the SNP, hating Scotland generally, which is supposed to have been his own home country. But his latest outburst had me laughing, because what he wants to do, according to his latest statement, is that if the SNP is unfortunate enough to lose a lot of seats to Labour in the next general election in London, and I think he's talking here about the Labour Party getting the biggest number of Scottish seats, that would be a loss for the SNP in terms of just the representation. They would no longer be the third party in Westminster. They would basically just be an additional party. But according to George, if the SNP loses seats in the UK general election, he is calling on the United Kingdom government to engineer a Holyrood election. Now, a Holyrood election is not due until 2026? Another 2 years. So we're not really even, we're just past the halfway mark of the current administration in Holyrood. And as far as I remember, the Holyrood Parliament has fixed terms of 5 years per government before any general election can be held. So 2026 is slated as the next time when a Holyrood election could actually be held. Now, it's normally the remit of the Scottish Parliament to decide when that general election should take place. However, according to George Fowkes, he wants the United Kingdom government to try to finagle some way of forcing the Scottish Parliament to hold a general election far sooner than it's meant to happen. Now, this would have to be some kind of emergency procedure for the United Kingdom to overrule the entire devolution settlement in the kind of way that George Fowkes imagines is possible. Frankly, I think this is the most ridiculous thing he has ever said, and he said a lot of extremely ridiculous things over the years. But the idea that somehow the British state is capable of overriding the democratically elected parliament in Scotland, which has fixed terms, would mean they'd have to rewrite the entire Scotland Act 1998 and amend it so that the British state has control over when Holyrood may or may not have general elections. That would take years, because Westminster, when it comes up with new legislation, struggles to get things done quickly because it is so ponderous, so inefficient, and with people like the Lords, and remember there's over 800 of these people who have done absolutely nothing since they retired from professional politics other than sit in this chamber flapping their gums as George Fowkes has done, that things would move terribly slowly, and it would be very difficult for Mr. Fowkes' idea to ever come to fruition. So again, I think it's just more Scotland-hating nonsense from the Lord. The second piece of news today, I think, is really quite staggering. And of course, it comes from BBC Scotland, as ever, the wonderful BBC Scotland, and its subtle and yet sometimes completely clumsy attempts at propaganda. They've taken a story which, of course, is the result of British cuts to the block grant to Scotland. Now, because of cuts in the British budget and public spending in England and the rest of the UK, the Barnett consequentials, in other words, the percentage of the money which is spent in the United Kingdom, which Scotland supposedly gets, which is about 8.2%, would also be cut by a similar percentage. And that means that the Scottish Government is unable to continue replanting native Scottish woodland at the rate which they are aiming to do. Originally, they were aiming for approximately 18 hectares per year to be planted with native Scots pine saplings in order for new forestry to grow and for it to eventually begin to absorb CO2 from the atmosphere. All part of Scotland's plans to decarbonise and to try to reabsorb whatever carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere at the moment through the planting of massive forests. Now, it's a noble cause, and it would have been possible to plant the targeted 18 hectares had the British state not cut the block grant. The BBC, in its so-called journalism, has got a few quotations from the forestry organisation in Scotland, which is obviously disappointed at this, saying that they will have to cut the planting down by some 41%, I believe, is the drop in the expected amount of forestry to be planted. So something like less than half, maybe about 9 hectares will be planted this year instead of the planned 18. So it's slowing down our progress towards fighting climate change, just simply because of a lack of money coming from London. The BBC, in its reporting, inserted between several paragraphs in its report today, a highlighted phrase, a bullet point in bold, which said, and it's in quotation marks, we may have to burn thousands of saplings after the cuts. We may have to burn thousands of saplings after the cuts. Now, I looked for any kind of attribution, any kind of group or individual who actually said this, that the BBC is quoting, that there would be a burning of saplings simply because they're not being planted. And there isn't one. This statement that's been inserted by the BBC gives the impression that the Forestry Commission in Scotland, or the Forestry Organisation, which has replaced it, would be forced to burn all the saplings that they've been so carefully growing and nurturing in their nurseries for planting in these new forests. Now, I can only conclude that since this comment has been attributed to no professional organisation, no spokesperson at all from the forestry industry, that this must be just something that the BBC has invented and inserted into its reporting, so that it appears as if someone somewhere has said that thousands of saplings must be burned because of the SNP's lack of funding of this important environmental action. I can only conclude that this is a complete lie. When the BBC publishes something, usually a quotation like that is given an attribution. So-and-so said this, or a spokesperson from this organisation said that. No such attribution is in that article at all. And that tells me that the BBC has been requested to plant the idea, if you'll pardon the pun, that the Scottish Government is going to cause saplings to be burned because of their lack of funding for this forestry project. So, as I say, it's a remarkable lie. It can only really be a lie because there is nobody who said it, and the BBC does not claim that anybody did say it, so it must be them who's saying it. That's my only conclusion here. Now, speaking of lying and deception, brings me to Sir Lindsay Hoyle, the temporarily installed Speaker of the House of Commons, who, as we all know, in the last few days has, first of all, refused a Scottish National Party motion for a ceasefire to be voted on by the Chamber in the House of Commons. Now, Lindsay Hoyle, as I reported earlier on this week, was definitely lent on by somebody, probably Sir Keir Starmer, in some back room behind closed doors, telling him that he must basically abandon this Scottish motion and get rid of it and substitute a Labour motion instead. Not just an amendment, but a completely new motion calling for a ceasefire, which doesn't mention the fact that the Israeli Defence Forces are conducting a kind of mass extinction event in Gaza, which apparently, according to the IDF, is a coincidence, and they have herded 1 million Palestinian refugees into a tiny enclave in the south of Rafah, and are now warning that they're about to go into full assault mode in this area and have said that they will evacuate these people. Now, Lindsay Hoyle had come back to the Commons and denied the SNP motion, basically just swept it aside and introduced a Labour motion. When the SNP challenged them on this, they were told by Sir Lindsay Hoyle that there would be another opportunity, a so-called SO 24, which is a Standing Order 24 of the House of Commons, which entitles the SNP to a replacement debate and vote on their motion for a ceasefire. The SNP were then told the following day that that wasn't going to happen. Lindsay Hoyle basically had lied to them and he was no intentions of doing this whatsoever. Now, behind the scenes, this is the interesting part of the story, incidentally. So Lindsay Hoyle is meant to be a neutral, politically neutral speaker. He's not allowed to have any or give any preferential treatment to any party, specifically and particularly his own party, the Labour Party. But he seems to have done just that. But not only that, but it's emerged in reports today that Sir Lindsay Hoyle's father, who is also a lord, incidentally, as far as I understand it, was a founder member of an organisation called the Friends of Israel. Now, it's a coincidence, isn't it, that Sir Lindsay Hoyle gets rid of an SNP motion for a ceasefire that contains the wording which says that there is a genocide going on in Gaza, and that they're talking about ethnic cleansing, and this is a war crime. No mention of that. Is it a coincidence that his father was one of the founding members of the Friends of Israel? Well, you could argue yes or no, but it certainly must have some bearing on his decision, as well as his party allegiance to Sir Keir Starmer, who obviously had engineered this entire event to the benefit of the Labour Party. And then we have Lord Fowkes, as I said at the top of the show, demanding some kind of Holyrood election if the SNP does not win a majority of Scottish seats at Westminster. So it seems to be a concerted effort from the Labour side to undermine the democracy of Westminster to their own advantage, to disadvantage the SNP, and basically to make SNP MPs at Westminster largely redundant, pointless. They have no purpose there. And as I mentioned in some of my posts on X recently, I think it's time that our pro-independence MPs basically came out of Westminster permanently and don't return there, because they have no role to play there. They're not listened to. They're not given any democratic votes, which they're entitled to. None of the rules of Parliament which apply to these things are fixed, and they can be amended, they can be removed, they can basically do what they like. They don't have any written rule book which must be followed. There's no constitution for the United Kingdom that's written down that tells them what they may and may not do. And so all Scottish MPs are basically worthless when it comes to Westminster. There's no point in us having elected officials at Westminster because we can't affect anything. There's not enough of us. It's not an equal union. If it were an equal union, we would have over 300 MPs at Westminster, and we would be the official opposition to whatever the unionist politicians manage to get their 300-something MPs. But that's not the case. I noticed recently also that on several Twitter exchanges, people have said that Scotland is in a voluntary union. But this is only something which the United Kingdom made up in 1960 when it had to explain why to the European Council Scotland was in a union. And they said that Scotland wasn't a colony, that it had equal rights in the union, that it was a voluntary partner, and it voluntarily agreed to join the United Kingdom in this union. But they neglect to mention the fact that there was never any public referendum or vote for the people of Scotland in 1707 about whether they wanted to be part of a union with England or not. So at the end of the day, as far as I can see at least, we've got Lord Foulkes, we've got the Labour leader, we've got the Labour Speaker of the House, all working together to basically make it pointless for the SNP to exist in Westminster. And then we have the BBC lying about forestry cuts in Scotland, claiming that saplings will be burned when nobody actually said that at all. It's all part of the Scotland bad narrative, and as we all know, it's pointless watching BBC Scotland if you want to hear news. It's all fake, it's all fairy tales, it's propaganda, it's SNP bad, it's ferries are bad, it's this bad, that bad, Scotland's basically crap. And so, there is no point in being in this union, a union which belittles a so-called equal partner and denies it equal representation, and then makes what little representation they have allowed its equal partner pointless. Then the whole idea of being in the union is also pointless. There's no point in us remaining in the union, and there's very, very little point in any SNP or ALBA MPs remaining in Westminster. To my mind, there should be a mass walkout, it should be permanent, they should return home, and in Scotland we should reconvene the Convention of the Estates, all the elected officials of Scotland, to decide how Scotland should proceed in the future, including allowing every Scottish voter to decide whether the union should survive or not. Because plainly, it's not a union. We are colonised, we're being exploited, everybody knows it, and yet we are powerless in Westminster to change anything at all. We might as well, as I said in a recent X post, send a bunch of circus clowns down there to entertain these braying, abusive Tory, Labour and Liberal Democrat MPs in Westminster, because they would have exactly the same effect. Anyway, that's it from me today. I'll talk to you again, I hope, later in the week. In the meantime, please keep following the show. Please keep donating. It is helping. And I need the donations to roll in relatively regularly to keep up this level of content this frequently. So thank you to all my supporters. And as I said yesterday, thank you to Stevie, who continues to post my IndyCar shows on on, what does he now call it? Anyway, he posts on YouTube. I'll remember the name eventually. But thank you all for watching. Keep the faith. And remember, independence is all up to us. Our politicians largely are useless now. Not because they're useless people, but because they've been made to look ridiculous in London, as is their purpose in the union. See you soon. Bye for now.